Hey everyone. This time we read Not All Fairy Tales Have Happy Endings by Ken Williams. So, for those that don't know, Ken Williams, along with his wife Roberta Williams, created Sierra Online. They were the biggest, and I mean the biggest computer game maker during the 80s and the 90s. They pioneered a lot of things, like the graphics and adventure games, and a few other things as far as technology goes regarding computer games. I kind of wish that Ken's wife, Roberta, actually wrote this book instead of Ken. Mostly because if she wrote it, there would have been more of a focus on the game development. Ken focuses more on the business side of it, which makes a lot of sense because that's, for the most part, what he was doing. He did try to involve himself in game development, but he just wasn't able to all the time. His job was really to grow the business. And he did a very good job of it up until he kind of had to leave the company because he just couldn't stand what was going on anymore. In this book, Ken's very upfront about the things that he feels were his fault. He admits that it's just his own memory and his own recollection of what happened, so he doesn't try to give you a full picture of what was going on in Sierra at the time. It's really just through his own eyes. So he's willing to take a lot of the fault for what was going on, and he seems to take a lot of the blame and put that onto himself. I don't know if that's all really his fault, but that's the way he wrote the book. I mean, he comes across as sounding like a really great guy in this. So the first few chapters cover Ken's life prior to Sierra. He had a really interesting background growing up. He kind of came from a family unit where he just didn't want to be at home. He didn't have a great relationship with his mother, and it kind of seems like they were just out of his life once he got to college. Ken was able to graduate high school early, which is really commendable, so he went to college early. And he was actually a year younger than Roberta when she went to college at 18. I just find that whole story really fascinating. And they also had to end up waiting a year to get married, which I thought was a little funny at first when I read it. I mean, they seem to have like a really good relationship, and you do get a few excerpts in here where Roberta read what Ken wrote and then responded to it, which is kind of funny. It doesn't happen often enough in this book, but the few times it does happen, it's pretty great. So as I mentioned, Ken goes into the business side an awful lot, which is something a little bit more interesting. I mean, I really like it when developers and other people in the video game industry go into the development side, and I don't really hear a lot about the business side of things. So getting to hear Ken's perspective on that and kind of seeing how some of the sausage is made, I guess, is pretty interesting and kind of different for one of these books. So there are a couple of stories that Ken tells in this, which I found really fascinating. He tells a bunch of them, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of them here because they're the ones that were most interesting to me. So in the book Masters of Doom, we hear the story from its perspective about how Sierra tried to purchase their company. And it was really interesting, but I kind of wanted to hear the rest of it. And Ken provides the rest of it here in this book. And it's really fascinating that, it was really just a hang-up with some issues of financing. They weren't able to give both cash and stock, and that kind of ended up killing the deal. And it doesn't sound like a whole lot from a business perspective, but it was a hang-up in the deal, so they couldn't finish it. And Ken admits in this, he regretted actually not being able to buy id. He didn't really like the violence in their games, but he appreciated the technical achievement that they had made, and also knew that the direction of the video game industry was going towards more mature content. So he kind of wanted to be in on that. From there, I really found the story of Outpost to be very interesting. The first part of that, Ken kind of shares his ideas for game development and talks about how Outpost was sort of done in the reverse of that, and he kind of regrets really allowing it to do that. And also talks about how just the budget kept going up, the time kept on getting pushed back, and finally he just had to tell them, look, you guys need to get it out by this date, ship it, and that's what we're going to do. And unfortunately Outpost was shipped in an unfinished state. This happened quite a bit, honestly, from a lot of the PC developers, and it really kind of sucks, especially if you weren't like tuned in to what was going on in the market at the time and you didn't really follow the news of the video game industry. You might get a game and not know that it's unfinished. This happened to me a few times, like with Dark Sun. I didn't know that the game wasn't finished and required a patch. With XCOM, I didn't know there was a bug in it that required a patch. And with Outpost, they needed to patch in all the features that were in the manual that were not in the game. The next part that I found really interesting was when Sierra was sold. This is near the end of the book, or at least in the last third of it. And Ken talks a bit about how he regrets really selling Sierra. And how throughout the book, he kind of builds up to this, where he talks about the venture capitalists, and then he talks about eventually one of them kind of selling him a bill of goods to buy his company, and then just really cutting him out of any decision making with that company. So the last thing I wanted to talk about from this book is when they sold Sierra. Now, as I mentioned, Ken got sold a bill of goods when he sold Sierra, and he basically got screwed. But not only him, the entire company of Sierra got screwed, as they were now put under the management of somebody different who didn't necessarily believe in any of the products that Sierra was putting out. Not only that, but the people who bought it turned out to be criminals and ended up, going to jail and having to pay billions of dollars in fines for basically defrauding the government for years. And that also didn't help Sierra out at all, as the stock price of the company plummeted, and people who had stock options in the company were basically left with a bunch of worthless paper, and they lost a lot of money, and it just was not a good situation for anyone. Ken had left Sierra at this time, so he was only really hearing about things from Roberta, who was having a terrible time on her own, and by 98, both of them left the company, and that kind of ends the Williams involvement in Sierra, which is really a shame. After reading this, I just started thinking about a bunch of other companies that I kind of remembered fondly. You have Sierra, you have SSI, you have Microprose, and I just started thinking, why did they go away when other companies like Electronic Arts or Activision, they got to keep going? It just sort of made me wonder a lot about the video game industry, and wonder about, some of the companies that aren't around anymore that made games that were really great, got bought up by larger companies, and those games are just sort of disappeared, or they turned into something that I don't really like anymore. So I know we left it on kind of a down note there, but that's really the story of Sierra. They just kind of went out on a down note, unfortunately. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and have a great day, everyone.